All right, Flatten 4R4. So the Flatten brush, there's a few of them, or at least a variation of it in here already, right there, Flatten. It is not the same thing as Flatten 4R4. It has a different way of modifying the geometry that I don't like as much as the Flatten 404. So we can potentially play around with this and see if I can demonstrate the difference, but it's something that just kind of takes a little bit of experience with Flatten 404 before you realize that this one is kind of leaving a little bit of functionality behind. So anyway, Flatten 404, the only thing you've got to do with Flatten 404 is you've got to add the alpha 28, which is our square alpha, which is why it's included here in the main menu. And then take your focal shift and drop it down to something in like the mid 50s potentially. And what this will allow you to do is you can begin, it's kind of like clay tubes in the sense that it has a squared off presentation, but it doesn't actually raise or lower the geo so much as kind of average the position. And my primary approach to modeling is, at least organic modeling, is I block something in using clay tubes and other brushes too, depending on what what's required. But then I'll use the Flatten 4/4 brush to kind of figure out what the actual planar configuration of the model happens to be. And you probably, if you stick with this tutorial series, you're going to see plenty of examples of the workflow. So you can see here how this looks now after I've kind of noodled on it for 15 seconds or whatever. With the Flatten 4/4 brush, is it's a nice way to just kind of make things a little bit more organized, and you can see where the big changes are in the shape. So that's Flatten 4/4. Very, very useful. Damn standard, also very useful, and especially useful with a little bit of a lazy mouse. So let me just kind of walk this back a bit so we get to something that looks a little bit cleaner. Make sure I've got enough geometry here. So that's 250,000 polys. That's going to be just fine. What it's going to do now that I've gone that far back in time is the next stroke I make is it's going to say like, well, hold on, you're about to nuke a whole bunch of undo history. Do you mean to do that? Because this button and this button are really close together, and sometimes you hit it on accident, you don't notice it. So Zbrush is just trying to save you from the heartache of losing all of that wonderful work that we may have done there that we potentially would want to hang on to. So I'm just going to draw something here, and it'll say, here's our little warning. So you're about to get rid of 143 undo history entries. Do you want to do that or not? And once you've done it, they are gone. We're not getting those back. Like I can hit undo, and it doesn't matter. So now that we've got the little undo history warning thing out of the way, you will probably end up seeing that. Just be aware. Don't do it unless you mean to do it. We can take a look at damn standard. So damn standard is going to give us this nice valley, right? And you can see how useful it is to have lazy radius because it gives us this lovely, lovely smooth thing that otherwise might have a little bit more variation. In fact, in this case, this might be a good one to try out our lazy snap. So I'm going to make a little line. And then the way lazy snap works, there we go. Yeah, so it's like if you're anywhere close to it, it's going to go ahead and see if I'm far enough away, it ignores that last point. But if I'm close enough to it, it'll just start off exactly where I was. So the larger this value is, the further away you can be from your stroke. Yeah, that's a good example. Thanks, damn standard. Anyway, so I use this all the time. Damn standard is a very, very useful one for all kinds of things. But this crevice thing is a very common form. And with all of the brushes, if you hold Alt, you will get the opposite form. So here we're starting to get like a, I don't know how you would describe that, a very skinny snake or something. So yeah, let's see. So that's damn standard. And then finally over here we have the move brush. And the move brush, all of these other brushes are only really paying attention to the direction that the surface is pointing, right? So if I come over to standard and I sculpt, it doesn't really matter what the orientation of my camera is because the brush is modifying the geometry according to the direction that the geometry is facing. With move, it actually does matter where my camera is because the movement is based on the camera relative to the geo, right? So hopefully that makes sense. But move is really useful as well, and I tend to use move more at a lower subdivision level, and you can see why here. If you try to move it, well, let me go to the side view here. You don't get a very smooth transition, right? It's obvious where the move brush hit and where the move brush didn't hit. You get that line. So if you're looking for something that's a little bit more eased into the geo, if you do that at a lower subdivision level, you just get a little bit of a softer transition. So this might not be an amazing example of that, but that's the idea. So let's see. So there is Z standard, play tubes, flatten, damp standard, and move. You may notice there's some other brushes here, Z modeler and IMM primitives. They're a little bit more complicated. Certainly worth covering, but probably not in this video. Z modeler is ZBrush's poly modeling tool. So let me just kind of very quickly show you what that looks like. So you can do, it's context sensitive, so whichever kind of component you're mousing over, a face, an edge, or a vert, you will get a different menu, which you can access by holding the space bar down. If you're familiar with Maya, you'll see something like what we could do in extrude here. Whoops, let me delete my subdivisions. It's kind of picky about a few things. So this is something that we talk about in more detail in later videos, but for now, just be aware that that's what this one does. And if for some reason you feel like you want to get in and start messing with polygons, there's a few other things that are useful to understand. Like for instance, these colors here indicate what are called polygroups, and you can organize your functionality around polygroups if you want. And there's just some other things that are kind of worth knowing before you jump too deeply into this. And the insert multi-mesh stuff is I'd say potentially not that complicated of a concept, but again, there's some background that you probably want to know before you start playing with it too much. But it's a way that you can add individual pieces of whatever, and there's lots and lots of IMM brushes that are available by default. Let's talk about the brush menu here, since I just did something that might be useful. Get rid of this. So if you just click on any of these brushes, and then I think you give it a second click, it'll open up your brush menu, which again will look a little different than mine. I've got some extra stuff in here. If you want to look for, say you've hit a button and for some reason your standard brush is some other brush, right? So if you wanted to get your standard brush back, you can just tap the S key, and that will basically isolate all the brushes that start with S, and then you can just click standard. There's another brush I haven't talked about, which is probably, I mean, it's useful, but I tend to avoid messing with it too much because it's, let me see, I'll show you here in a second, you'll see what I'm talking about. I'm going to go with the highest subdivision. Oh yeah, subdivisions. One more thing to mention is if you want to add a higher subdivision, you've got to be at the top. You can't, like if I was down here in the middle and I try to hit divide, it's going to give me a warning saying you can only add another subdivision if you're at the highest subdivision level. And so if right now that's plenty for me showing what I was about to show you, which is the smooth brush. I'm going to go ahead and increase the intensity here a bit. So we'll just put some stuff down. You can see it's kind of noisy and there's all kinds of things happening. If I hold the shift key by default is mapped to the smooth brush. The smooth brush exists here in our menu, which I can get to by tapping S, and you'll find there's the smooth brush. And when I hold the shift key, you can see it gets darker. It's being lit up there. If you hold the shift key and you click on another brush, what you will do is you will assign that brush to the shift key. So if I'm on standard, that's fine, but as soon as I hold the shift key down, now because I assigned it to the clay tubes, now that's clay tubes. So if you don't want that, it's no big deal. You just have to come over to smooth and just click it, and so it'll automatically be reassigned to the smooth brush. The other thing you can do if for some reason it's fighting you is you can just restart Zbrush and it'll go back to the default value for the shift key assignment to that brush. But the assumption is you probably want it to be the smooth key. So yeah, there's certainly more stuff to talk about, and we will take a look at the next whatever in the next video. So hey, it'll be fun. A surprise. See you there.